Welcome to Season 5 of SheVentures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. SheVentures is a podcast about women and their work and life pivots. I believe in the power of storytelling. I also believe that if you change one woman's life, you start to change a family or a community. Our mission is to elevate the diverse stories of everyday women in their work. One promise, no mansplaining ever. Sit back, listen, and hit subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at SheVenturesPodcast.com. If you are a college grad struggling to find your first 9 to 5, or if you're a parent watching your Gen Z lose hope on their job search, this episode is for you. Today's guest is founder of Next Great Step, a company focused on helping college students or recent grads transition to the job market. An often overlooked life pivot, but a very important one. Her company boasts a 90% success rate when it comes to having students find a job that they are happy in. And I'm sure that their parents are very satisfied when that happens as well. Her book, The Next Great Step, which I have right here, this is what got me so interested. It's really very well-researched, fact-filled guide to help parents, educators, students, employers with step-by-step suggestions and practical how-tos. And the way that the book is formatted is incredible, and it just really helps you along the journey. And so you really don't feel alone when you're reading it. As the proud mother of 2 Gen Z daughters, I am so glad to have her on today. Beth Hendler-Grunt, welcome to SheVentures.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I am excited to have you because this is a topic that is very close to my heart right now. And it is a pivot going from college to your first job. But before we talk about that, which is the topic of your book and about what you do today, I wanted to just talk a little bit about you. And you have 30 years of experience and have done some pivots yourself. So I hope that you could just give us a brief overview of that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I think there's so many pivots, I think, for all of us. You think of like major milestones and careers, but I've been fortunate, I guess. I've had a lot of pivots, and all of that it requires all of us to be adaptable and open to those changes. I think some of the major things that enabled me to be successful, just even when I was in college, I actually got an internship when it wasn't kind of like the most in thing to do. I didn't want to go abroad. A lot of friends were doing that. I decided to work in Washington, D.C. for a semester. And that was really like my first internship. And interestingly enough, that internship was what launched my first job and first career in the tech sector. So I'd say that was one of my first pivots. The next, in terms of where I've gone, and obviously I got married and have children, and you start to really also reframe what's important to you once you have family and kids. And I was very much on a track when I first started my career of, I want to be a vice president. I want to be in this type of role. And then I had a baby. And then I rethought that in terms of importance and how important that was. But I still was able to find things where I was able to learn and grow in a work environment and still be able to, raise my family. I'd say that the next pivot was when I worked for AT&T and Lucent Technologies and these big companies for about 15 years. And I was just ready for something different. And I also really needed to be at home more because there were lots, as my kids were younger, there was a lot more demands. So I took on a role where I pivoted and I was a consultant. What was great is that I had more flexibility. I was doing some traveling, but I was able to be there and still learn and grow. And I had the opportunity to work with CEOs and their executive teams and helping them develop a strategy. So that was a really exciting time. And then again, I came to a point where I didn't really want to work for anybody anymore. I didn't want anyone to tell me where I had to be and what time I had to be there or whether I had to miss something from my kids' events. And I wanted to try my hand at being an entrepreneur. One of the things that I saw in my consulting work is that they'd always say to me, I'd love to hire a recent grad. I'd love to hire a young adult, but I'm not going to. I'm going to pass over them because they don't understand the scope of the problems that we have. And I don't have time to babysit. And I was becoming of the age where I had lots of friends saying to me, I don't understand. My kids went to a great school and they have really good grades and they cannot get a job. And I don't understand why. That became my next pivot. I said, what if I took the strategies that I taught to executives and taught it to young adults in a really simple way? How do you have a strategy? How do you articulate your value? How do you compete against others? And that's how I started this company of Next Great Step. I literally had my friends' kids come in my basement and I would teach some of these concepts. And they'd say, we're not getting this. We don't understand this. This is great. This is what I need to figure out my career path and how to be the one chosen for jobs. So, those are just some of those pivots in my life that kind of brought me to where I am. I mean, there's lots of different ones. I've mentors or great disappointments or great failures, by the way, which also lead to tremendous pivots. So I don't want you to think like everything's perfect. I didn't have this perfect trajectory, but those were some of the major milestones for me.
Just because you brought it up, and I don't want to forget to ask you, if you have one failure, I guess really I'm of the mindset that nothing's truly a failure because you learn from it. What does come to mind for you?
Oh, there's plenty. I'd say early on in this particular running this business, the way we do it is I speak to a lot of parents, but their students and their kids are the ones who are really the client. I once took on a client, a young woman who was a college student who was looking for a job, and the mother spoke to me and she said, "Oh, she's going to be perfect." And I learned my lesson that I didn't speak to her daughter ahead of time, which that was the biggest lesson. And it turned out she had some serious mental illness and she cried the entire session that we were together. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a therapist and our materials are very, just more of like, tell me what your strengths and your weaknesses and let's talk about an elevator pitch. Like it's not overly emotional, but she cried the entire hour, which I felt horrible for. But I realized that from that point, I will never, ever take on a student without speaking to them first. These are just like more lessons learned of or just how you navigate the process. Doesn't matter how much a parent or how much money they offer you or how great they think it's going to be. I was like, this isn't good for anybody. I don't want her to be so upset. And this is probably not the right fit for what we do. So that was just, there's so many. I have other things in my corporate life where I've, made mistakes or presented to the wrong people or didn't give the right proposal or wasn't researched enough, all those things. And they feel horrible at the time, but it's incredible learning for us and for myself.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And for some reason, I thought you only had one son, but do you have more than one child?
Yeah, I have two. I have two sons, one who's a recent grad, class of 2021 grad, and one who is a college sophomore right now. So I'm living this real time.
Yes, and that was what I wanted to ask you. Is as a parent yourself, as a mother, what is the most challenging part of helping your own children with the transition? I guess they haven't quite made the transition from college life to the workforce, but what has been challenging for you in that regard?
I think what's challenging for me is similar to what's challenging for a lot of other parents. Parents in general have had a lot of life experience or can give good advice, but it's also reading the room. Like, does your child want to hear this advice? And even they know, mom's the career expert or helping to get an internship or the first job, but it doesn't help because it's still mom. And I have that same challenge the way any parent who has a career and tries to give good advice, like, oh, you should call them on the phone. They're like, oh, mom, that's not how it's done anymore.
You don't know anything.
Right. You don't know. That's not how it works. Or mom, there's these platforms and that's how you apply. I'm like, I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. So I feel very fortunate. I've worked really hard to have a good relationship with each of my boys. And they're both very, very different kids, very different needs, personalities. And I've worked really hard to try to form relationships and where they trust me and I trust them. Look, there's still things I'm sure we don't tell each other, but I think in the end, they'll take my advice when they really need it. They do come to me. They'll say, can you proof this letter? Can you help me with the letter that I want to write to this person? I've never met them before. Can you help me kind of make sure I have the right words? So I think they know that I know, we talk about it over dinner. It's like they always love to hear, I'm like, here's this ethical dilemma I had with a client. What do you think I should do? So I really try to engage them. And I think them understanding that makes them more receptive to the guidance because they see a lot of the clients are just like them. So look, I'm not going to tell you it's perfect. I do a lot of things that are probably not good or not right, or I open my mouth when I shouldn't. But I've learned a lot actually being in this role about really managing expectations and not imparting my shortcomings onto my kids, because I know a lot of parents sometimes do that. Again, not intentionally, but sometimes we take all of our missed opportunities and try to, well, I didn't do this, but you should do this, or I did this, or you better do it too. I really try to see like who they are and the talents they have, and that they will all be fine. That's the thing. We all need that reassurance as moms. I'll just say, look, they'll be okay. But it's hard. There's no, I don't have a perfect answer, but I try very hard.
I love what you said about that they actually listen, because it gives me hope. My daughter, one of them is heading to college. The other one is a sophomore in high school. And I often wonder if, even when they ask for advice, if they, sometimes I don't even know if it goes anywhere, but I think maybe at the right time, it does come back to them when needed. And I think, to echo what you said, having an open relationship with your children, by that I don't mean permissive, but I just mean one that is full of trust, earned, is essential. So one of the things that I hoped you could talk about, and I see this a lot in my own work because I work with interns, usually college-aged interns, is what would you say are the biggest challenges that students face when they are transitioning from college to trying to get that first job?
There's many challenges. But I think one of the biggest challenges that students face in making that transition from college to the real world, I think is more about the expectation and how easy they thought it was going to be. I hear this all the time. People say, well, I went on the college tour and the college promised me that by going to school there, I'd actually have a great career when I graduated. I think the part that was missing, and maybe that could be the case, but the part that's missing is that they maybe didn't realize how much work would still be on them, and that the university is not going to take care of it for them, and that they actually have to put effort into it. And I think the realization of how much more effort is needed, and not just in your senior year or junior year, that you actually need to start doing it as a freshman. And that feels very overwhelming because you're just adjusting to college. I understand the difficulty and the pressure about getting into college and what we've done in this country about how people put so much on it. And I'm not saying that it's not important. It's just one piece in the process. It doesn't solve for everything. Awesome. You got in. That's great. But now you're there. And now you need to really take advantage of it, utilize all the resources that in front of you. Or the other thing I see is, you know what? I finally got into college. I'm just going to enjoy this. And my parents, they're connected or they know people, or I'm sure I'll just meet somebody or someone's going to make an introduction. And the other challenge, it's so funny because I talk to so many parents who say that, who are very well educated and very high level careers. And they say, I made an introduction and it didn't go anywhere, because what's happening is that their kids are kind of blowing it because they're not prepared. They're not really researched. And they just assumed because mom or dad was friends with somebody that it would happen. But when it comes to business, no one's going to risk their reputation unless they actually feel and know that you are competent in the work. So I think those are just what I see the most about students, is just a little bit of mismanagement of expectations of what's actually going to happen and the amount of work that you actually have to put in to get the result that you want.
You're the expert, but I have seen that in the trenches myself. And a perfect example is yesterday. A young woman is finishing her internship with me, and I was talking to her about her next step. And she was using Indeed, sending out cover letters, random cover letters, not getting responses, feeling demoralized because she wasn't getting responses. And then the following week, sorry, that was the first week. The following week when I met her just to check with her again, she had gotten one response that ended up being something like a sales offer for something. And so that even demoralized her further. But what I did do with her was I said, look, let's take ChatGPT, which, by the way, is something that a lot of jobs are now requiring. Let's use ChatGPT together. Let's use your major and where you want to live. And let's find out what the options are. And I actually sat down with her. I made a spreadsheet with what the different public relations specialists, all these different ideas. And then the next thing that she said to me was, I find, and I've heard this before, that jobs, entry-level jobs, are requiring 2 to 3 years of experience. And to that, I really didn't know what to say other than, listen, that might be the case, but if you do the legwork of finding out who is responsible for the position and you demonstrate that, yes, while you are young and out of college, but you are eager and these are XYZ skills and maybe even know something about them, that is probably going to really make you stand out. Or do a 1-minute video. Like, there's so many ways to be creative and stand out. And that's what I feel is lacking is it's kind of like this. It's the meritocracy of, I don't want to blame it all on this, but of getting participation trophies and just kind of expecting things to be handed to them.
It's funny that you say that. There's a lot of, I've used that same phrasing in the past because we see where our kids, my kids, and just a lot of there's a lot of getting trophies for showing up. And it's interesting that I have young adults who are coming out of Ivy League schools who have never gotten a grade lower than an A and have everything going for them. And they go to apply for a job. I literally had this the other day. I had a young man, he goes to Yale, and he is applying and he's not getting, this is the first time in his life he's getting rejected or no response at all. And he does not know how to handle it. He has no coping mechanism for it. There's also that expectation of I did what you told me. I got the grades. I showed up to class. But the job search is a totally different level of criteria. So yes, having a GPA is good, but then it's okay, that's just baseline. Tell me, what do you know about us and how can you help us and how are you going to add value and how are you going to articulate that? And I don't care how great your resume is, you have to actually be able to verbalize all these things. And that's the part that I think so many of our kids are not fully prepared. It's funny, my older son will say to me, look, Mom, it's not my fault. You put this device in my hand. And that's how I learned how to talk. Now, of course, I made my kids pick up the phone and call people. But as a parent, you're just, yeah, okay. You can't always text your potential employer or send them a Snapchat or something. So, the tools, we are not always teaching that. I mean, we can go down another rabbit hole of who's accountable to teach our kids how to speak on the phone and how to network with somebody and how to shake their hand and look them in the eye. And then you have all these kids who just experienced COVID for the last 3 years in their bedrooms. You kind of have the perfect storm of all of these real challenges. I don't make any excuse for it that they're facing, and they haven't had the practice. They don't know how. They're overwhelmed. And then I'll just lay one more piece is you have this huge mental health issue where there's so many young adults with anxiety and depression or just lack of confidence. I mean, I feel like we are in a crisis of lack of confidence when they have so much to be confident about. So I feel like that's kind of my business. I'm in the confidence business. I want to make sure you bring that to you, but it's tough. It's really tough.
It definitely is. And I do see that in my children as well. I wondered, you had alluded to one should start in their freshman year. Can you give listeners a sense kind of what their children should be thinking about?
Absolutely. So real simple things to do starting freshman year, even though it seems kind of overwhelming because you're still picking out your bedding and you're not sure about living away from home. So I'm about really simple but intentional things. First thing is, in addition to your academics, pick a club. or two. Pick one for social, do something just for sports or something that you love to do, and maybe pick a club that's related to the major that you're in. It's a great way to meet people. It's just a great way to get exposure. You could potentially be on a leadership opportunity or ultimately as you stay with it. So pick two clubs, get involved. It's a great way to meet people. And it's also a really nice resume booster as well. The other thing is pick your favorite class and get to know that professor. Just go to office hours. Say, I'm really interested in your class. I'd love to maybe pursue this further or tell me other ways that I can do that. Having a professor that knows you starting freshman year can be so valuable because very often employers will come to professors saying, I need an intern. Who do you think I should hire? Or just giving advice. I really think that can be incredible. Even writing a referral for your grad school application. So all of those things, like get to know, pick a professor that you really like or first semester, second semester, but find somebody that you like. And the other thing I suggest is, and people think sometimes I'm crazy, but I'll tell you, I don't think so. Go to the career fair as a freshman, even though I know you don't need a job yet or an internship. And here is why. Because when it counts, you're going to be stressed and worried. But when it doesn't count, it's just a great way to practice. So practice putting on some professional clothes. Practice walking up to a couple people at the different tables, or whether it's in person or virtual. Introduce yourself. Ask them what they do or what the company does. And then you can maybe stay in touch with them. Just the practice of that conversation or even knowing what an employer might be asking you in future years makes you so much more confident for when it actually really matters. So simple things, not hard, just kind of putting yourself out there to start thinking about it.
Love it. I think those are great suggestions. I hadn't thought of the college fair one. I remember being in college, and I do know there was a college services office, but I just didn't really honestly think about it much. And I feel like that's true probably today as well. There's in many places, I don't know if it's that there aren't enough people, I'm not quite sure, or if the students are disengaged, but that connection doesn't really seem to be happening with that resource. What are your thoughts on that, and what can educators do to improve?
So career services is a tough one. And I'll tell you, when I first started this business, my initial idea was I am going to go to career services at all these different universities, and I'm going to come in to support them, supplement what they're doing, enhance it, not replace it, just be another resource that can help what they're doing. And the overarching feeling was kind of defensive. They're like, we have it under control. We don't need any outside resources. Fine, not an issue. But here's what I uncovered about career services. The truth is the statistics are only 1 in 4 kids actually ever show up and go. In many cases, many of the people who are running career services, it's not considered where the money goes at a university. A lot of times money goes towards the sports or towards a library building. Unfortunately, it's just not funded the way it should be. And then you also have people who've been in that department for maybe like 20, 30 years and are not current on how you look for a job. The other thing I've seen is that, and I know at a very well-regarded major university, public university, that for 20,000 liberal arts students, there's only 16 people. Well, that's not feasible, right? We know for the amount of attention and time, just the resource isn't being put there, and our kids are not going. They're like, oh, that's a waste of time, or oh, I don't need that. Or they show up and the support can be sometimes very tactical. Like, all right, here's the resume sample. We'll fix that. But they're like, I don't know what to do with my career or my life. Like the resume is the least of my issues. There are some schools that do it well. I think if you go to a university and you're in the business school, they take those kids under their wing a lot more and really guide them through, and the employers come looking for them. But overall, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And even those that are in the business schools that get the resources, and then it's like crazy competitive. So I'll have kids who come to me from top business schools saying, well, everyone else is going after these jobs, and how do I differentiate myself? I feel like there's a real challenge in career services. And I've spoken to a lot of people about it. One of the biggest problems is that it's not required. You don't need it to graduate. It's not a class. So until you build that into the credits or as part of a requirement, some schools will give you like 1 semester on, build your resume, things like that. But until you really put that into your curriculum, it's very hard.
Yeah, it's such an excellent point. Also, it's much like financial literacy. No one is ever taught how to manage their money, yet we're just expected to know how to do it. And I feel like job skills fall in that category as well of things that are not being taught that are really survival skills, honestly. So, when it comes to common misconceptions that students have about the job market, what are the most common ones and how can they be corrected?
The most common misconceptions that I see is really the use of technology and that it's a numbers game. And that if I just apply to more jobs on more job boards, eventually I will be found. Or eventually that, if it's 10, 20, 100, if it's just a numbers game, like eventually that's how I'll find my job because the math will just yield that. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is that that's not really the case. It's actually a huge waste of time because what comes back is either a scam or nothing at all, or maybe it's not exactly targeted to what you want. The other misconception that I see is that if I just fix my resume and I have this amazing resume, even a great LinkedIn profile, same thing, I will be found. Or I'm going to send that out and people are going to be like, wow, look at this resume. I have to hire this person. Again, just a piece of the puzzle. The important piece to remember is that people hire people, not an algorithm, not a tracking system, not Chat GPT. Is that ultimately you need to forge a relationship with someone who is looking to hire, or even someone who's in the field so you can get better educated about what they have to offer. And that part is scary. That's the part that I think they're making the mistake. They're like, oh, I don't want to get on the phone, or what am I going to say, or I don't know how to network, going back to things that they're not always taught. And I think that's the biggest mistake is they don't realize that networking is actually the number one way of how you gain employment versus submitting online or having a perfect resume.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about internships. Do you think that they are important for college age or high school age students?
I love internships, but I want to take a minute to define internships. It doesn't have to be this 10-week or 12-week formal rotation program at a big Fortune 50 company. It could be so many different things. And I think just the more we give our kids the chance to try things out, shadow someone, there's companies out there that offer project based. You can do a project for 2 weeks for a company and that's an internship. And you've gained experience and you didn't have to do it all summer. Or maybe you did it 3 days a week, or maybe you helped out somewhere. All of that matters. And I think even the part time jobs and scooping ice cream and delivering pizza, all of that teaches a lot as well. So I don't want to underplay that. There's a lot of skills to be learned about even, the customer service business. How do you optimize? How do you interact with people? I'm a big fan though of any kind of experience that helps you get better clarity about what you like and what you don't like. Because this is the perfect time to take all those risks. You don't have to commit. You don't have a family, you don't have a mortgage. Like you can try a lot of things out. And if you took on an internship and you realized you hated it, it was still the best use of time to realize that you didn't then look for that job full time that you might be, I don't want to say stuck in, but it's hard to move around. Like try it out and realize, what, I really don't like this aspect of this company or the way they treated me, but I like this part of it, or I learned this skill. So I think internships are tremendous. Again, it takes a lot of self initiative to find it and to get them. And people aren't just coming to be like, oh, you're a student, here's an internship. And even I get this all the time, someone will say, well, I messaged somebody on LinkedIn and I asked if they had any internships available. I said, you understand that's like asking somebody to get married and you've never met them before. They don't even know you.
Yeah.
You're just like, hi, I'm a so and so, and I really like your job. And do you have any internships? Like, that's not how you get it either. There has to be this process in the middle.
I love that. And I want to get into some of the ways that people work with you. I was curious because you work both with male and female students, obviously anecdotal, but is there a difference in the issues that typically present with students, or does gender not play a role in what you see?
Gender does not play a role in what I see. What I see more that's so interesting is that the students who come to me that on paper, I would say, why are they talking to me? They went to like a top school, they're engineering, they have like perfect grades. On paper, everything looks amazing, right? The same way in social media. But then they start talking and they're like terrified to speak, or they don't really know how to express themselves, or they're just rambling, so now and then I understand. I'm like, okay, now I know why you're not getting jobs, because you're not on point, you're not focused. So I don't see it in the gender differences. It's more of people come with either one of two main issues. One is, I don't know what to do with my life, or I know what I want to do and I'm trying, but I'm not getting any interviews or any entry points to get there.
How can people work with you?
People can work with us directly. So we provide advising to college students and grads. We help them do two things. One, to get clarity on their path and where they want to pursue, and then how to pursue that path and be the one to be chosen in the job. And we do that through private coaching and small group coaching. So I have a phenomenal team of advisors that we work with together. You can also buy the book, The Next Great Step, The Parent's Guide to Launching Your New Grad into a Career, because I wanted to put a tool in front of families that really enable them to step their young adult through the process as well. You can do it on your own with your student, or you can come to us and we'd be happy to help you.
And the book, which I have read, is really great. And having said that, though, can you just give one or two tips to parents who their kids are back home, they thought 18, you're out the door, kids are back, graduated, don't know what to do with their lives, and their parents are often frustrated?
So the tips that I offer to parents when they say, what do I do? Because my kid is still home and I really want to help them and it's been a struggle, is the first thing I say is you just have to stop and listen and ask a lot of questions. So before you say, go apply online or go update your resume or go talk to my friend, you need a real conversation to say, tell me what you're thinking. What are you interested in? And it's okay if it doesn't exactly match up to your major, because I know that's terrifying for a lot of kids, especially after the investment, to say, I don't know if I love my major so much or this aspect of it. Like, just have a really honest conversation of what interests you. The next thing is help them identify their skills. And I think talk about this topic of core skills. What are the top 3 things that they are the most competent, most skilled at, and they enjoy doing? Very often our kids, it's hard for them to see it. So as a parent, we can say, I've seen you do this. I've seen you be a part of this club and you can be a leader. And I've seen you demonstrate leadership skills. Or I saw you write for the paper. I know that you're a great writer. Let's talk about what are the few skills that you really want to hone in on. Because once they start to get that clarity and they start to see it themselves, the process becomes easier. They know where to leverage those skills. They know to maybe look for companies that need those skills. They maybe look for jobs that need them. They know how to maybe talk about themselves. So starting off with just an honest conversation of what are they thinking about and help them get clarity about their skills, I think are the 2 best things to start off with your kids.
And what I liked about your book is that when I was thinking about skills, I was thinking about very precise skill sets, but really you're also talking about soft skills as well. And I think broadening that definition is hugely helpful.
I think everybody has something to offer. They just don't always know what that is. But I am a fan of trying to find something that's more experience driven versus saying I'm a hard worker or I'm very responsible. Those are attributes. Those are how you do your skill. But let's get into what are you able to do? I can research, I can write, I know how to sell, I can code, I can analyze. Let's figure out those pieces and then go from there.
Lastly, I just wanted to ask you, as we're wrapping up, do you also work with universities? I know you said in colleges. Originally, that was your idea. Just wondering if there are colleges and universities where you do work with them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely have worked with universities to support them, whether it's I've taught classes, we've done webinars, we've supported career services in certain places. But, we've evolved too, where we've also worked with financial advisors as they help their clients with estate planning. I've worked with HR departments as they're trying to figure out even how to provide a benefit to parents of getting my book in front of them, because they want to make sure that they can help their employees' kids launch. So we've done a lot of different areas of supporting, but absolutely, yes, we work with universities and it's kind of just expanded. I think it's almost a universal challenge that anybody who has a young adult in their life or the young adults themselves, everyone's trying to figure out how do we get them to launch in a way that helps them to be successful and ultimately financially independent.
Do you have one sweet spot, one kind of, not kind of client, but like one area where you feel that you really shine in terms of how you're able to help people?
I think the place where we are able to impact the most is when we have someone, it's really in that sophomore to senior year in college, even a year or two out. So, that 5-year range is where we can really impact it, because what we're teaching is not only about how to get the first job or first internship, it's how to get the second and the third and the fourth. And I really feel strongly that the skills that we're teaching set you on the foundation for how to be successful throughout your entire career, not just this one job or one thing. So the earlier they learn it, the more success we've seen over time.
Super interesting. And again, for the video part, I'm just going to hold up this book. The next great step is an incredible read. I have notes inside of it. And I am so grateful that you were able to come on SheVentures today. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to SheVentures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.